Hey everyone, welcome back to the Badass Confidence Coach podcast. Okay, today Tim and I are talking about what are the traits of emotionally immature people. And as many of you know who are listeners of the podcast, these conversations here come out of conversations I'm having in real life, either with my kids or friends. A lot of times these episodes that we're doing come out of wonderful, just such interesting conversations I'm having with clients and issues that they're dealing with in their everyday lives. So I always think to myself, oh, this is a great conversation to take to all the listeners, because I know that if it's an engaging one that I'm talking about with my client, it's something I'm sure you all are interested in as well. Stuff of everyday life.
There's so many times we get into conversations out in the world and we're like, oh, that's good.
I know.
Like, I wish we were recording this right now.
And I wish I had a pen and paper, or I don't always have my phone with me.
I text myself. I'm
Yeah.
like, we got to remember this.
Yeah, good conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we're talking about emotionally immature people, and I want to go through this because I think that so many of us deal with this. There's people in our lives who frustrate us. So I'm going to take you through the list, and I want you to think about where this shows up in your life. And if you can really be brave, think about if this applies to you. Maybe you have some growth that you need to do in the world of emotional intelligence. Maybe you've got some work to do on growing more mature emotionally.
So quantify this whole thing. So you say emotionally immature, right?
We're going to go through it right now. I'm going to give you a list.
Okay.
But before we get started, I want to reach out to you to come talk to me. Reach out. Okay. Send me an email, hello@annamarcolene.com. If you want coaching, let's see if I would be a good fit for you. And if you want therapy, of course, you already probably know that has to be in the state of Illinois. But reach out to me. Okay. I invite you to feel relaxed, feel comfortable, and get on your phone or get on your computer and do it. Okay. Because I know that there's many times we think to do it. And I've done this myself. I'm not going to do it. I don't know if they're going to have time for me. I don't know if they're going to want to talk to me. And, I've kind of bit myself in the butt a little bit in the past doing that. So, don't get all up in your head, reach out. And if you want help, I'm here to help you in your personal development journey in your life.
It doesn't help. I mean, it doesn't hurt to get on a discovery call.
Just get on a call.
I think we all do that in different industries. That's just always a conversation. You never know where it's going to go.
Yeah. And I will help you. I'll help you. If I'm not a fit for you, or if there's something that's getting in the way, I'm happy to help share with you what information resources I have. Okay.
Love
to get
it.
you to where you want to be in your life.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. So emotionally immature people, they're those who tend to lack emotional development. They lack self-awareness in those interpersonal skills. So what are some of the traits? Number one, poor emotional regulation. Number one. So they struggle to manage their emotions. You see drama, you see outbursts, you can see tantrums, or the opposite, you can see people who just get totally shut down. That's emotional immaturity. I see this shut down quite a bit in my practice. And either my client getting shut down or the people in their life, them shutting down, which in turn shuts my client down. So that's a very regular conversation when we're talking about communication. And so we're going to do another episode on having difficult conversations. I've had episodes on that before, but we're doing it again because it's so important to continue for all of us to be thinking about and talking about how to better our communication skills and how to have those difficult conversations that people care about.
Yeah.
Okay. So poor emotion regulation. They really have difficulty handling frustration, disappointment in their lives. They certainly struggle with criticism, and they can't do it if they hear it without becoming really defensive or combative. That's someone who struggles with a poor emotional regulation. Now, I'm not going to go into today where that comes from. I will say this, much of it comes from childhood. Much of it comes from the mentoring or the lack of mentoring, what we did not get, what we did not learn from our first teachers, which is for probably 90% of us, our parents. They were the ones who taught us first. We learned by watching. We learned how to behave and how to communicate by observing what to do, what not to do. We picked up little toddlers, little ones, are smart little they're smart little beings, and they're watching what's going on around them. So That's usually where poor emotional regulation comes from. All
Yeah.
right.
So when you say this, I want to initially just lean towards, oh, you're talking about somebody that's not seasoned, that hasn't gone through life yet, that hasn't really had all these life experiences. It might be a little bit on the younger side of their, if their world is like, if you're 0 to 100, they're probably on the first half of that and probably not even on the first.
No, it's interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
But it's not true. I
No, it's
don't
not
think
at
it's
all.
true because I've seen it in all demographics. It's interesting.
Yes.
You know what I
Yes.
mean? And
Yes.
it's like you're like, "Ooh, like that person's like whatever, fill in the number, but like older than you and I." And it's like,
40s, 50s,
keep
60s,
going. Yeah,
70s,
yeah, keep there you go. And
80s.
you're like, "Wait,
Yes.
what?"
Well, you and I have seen this in our personal life.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and our professional life. We've seen it. I've seen it at work, and it's surprising when it comes out like
Right.
that.
People get very defended. They get their back up and they come out like their dukes up, ready for a fight.
Yeah.
Yes. They
Yeah.
have not learned how to regulate their emotions and they have not learned how to really do conflict, how to do conflict and how to move into resolve.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's surprising because if you see somebody that's older like that, and I'm talking when I say older, I'm saying like upper 60s, into your 70s, into your whatever that is,
Hmm.
into your 80s maybe, like you would think just logically that they would have been exposed to so many times where they could have learned from it. They would have come out of it and maybe corrected the ship, like righted the ship a little bit,
Right.
but they haven't. That's why I think for me, it's like shocking when I see it.
I think so much of that is the systems that we grew up in. I always go back to, like I said earlier, family systems. We all grew up in a system. Your workplace, Tim, you have a system within which you work. You have your own personal professional systems with like maybe how you show up to work each day with your emails and meetings you have to go to. But your team, you are a system. And then you have all those teams that come together and you've got all the managers. That's a larger system, right? We all work within systems. Families are systems. And we just learn a certain way of moving within a system, whether it be functional or dysfunctional. Most of us did grow up with some sort of dysfunction in our families. It's just how it is. We're imperfect beings. I think it's part of the human condition. Some of us got educated, some of us went to college and maybe we took some classes in communication, or we didn't. We read books, or we learned communication from a mentor, maybe from a coach, maybe from a teacher. Maybe we spent a lot of time around our friends' families and we learned, oh, this family communicates differently. This family, there's an ease within which they seem to exist with one another. There's laughter here, there's communication here. As we grow up and we experience other systems, we can learn, oh, that's how I want to be. My family's not like that. I want to be like that family. And then we just learn to operate within our own family system the way we've known it to be. So if you've got a mom and dad who don't talk and they shut down difficult conversations, well, then how do you learn? So
True.
you do
Yeah. Yeah.
learn, you can learn by observing others. I learned a lot in college. I did. I learned in all of my counseling classes. I learned in family therapy 101, 201, 301. Then in graduate school, I learned all the different ways that families operate. That's what helped me. You can do it by reading articles, going online, trying to broaden your horizons about communication, and really doing the work of looking at yourself. When I was in graduate school, we had to do that interpersonal therapy work because they would say, how are you going to go out into the world and counsel others if you didn't do it yourself? So that was we had, oh my gosh, these homework assignments, as well as being in your own therapy, of trying to understand the system within which you were raised. Well, for us as therapists, it was so that it didn't come up in the therapy space. It didn't come up in the treatment room, that you didn't bring up your own stuff with your clients. Be clear on where you come from or you came from, right? So, yeah, I think that if we saw chaos, if we saw drama, if we saw outbursts, we saw crying, or we saw none of that, if we saw the opposite, which is nobody talks here, there's a lot of silence in this house, there's a lot of quiet. I know my mom is mad at my dad, but no one ever talks about it. She just gives him the silent treatment until, I don't know, a few days from now. We're all used to that. That's how it is around here. We don't talk about stuff. In a lot of families, there's the huge elephant that's in the kitchen and everybody is ignoring the big elephant, figuratively speaking, and everyone's stepping over his big ass foot, but let's just step over. We're not going to talk about it though. And usually what happens is the person who's like, is anybody going to talk about the elephant that's here in the room in front of the refrigerator? No, this is our system. Be quiet.
Get out.
And you're the one that's told to be quiet,
Yeah.
shut up, put up and shut up,
Right.
or move out,
Right.
because
Right.
we don't do that here.
It's not how we roll it.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's emotional immaturity.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if I'm hearing you, so that person that we're talking about, that older person, they would have had to have made a choice at some point to act, to change, to force themselves to make a turn off that road, because the road leads back to where they came from.
I think it's
Everything,
a conscious decision to
right?
do different.
Yeah.
I think much of this for us is subconscious.
Yeah.
We might know it's there, we might know it exists, but it's like, hey, I mean, sometimes we'd rather live with the devil we know than the devil we don't know. And we don't know how to make those changes. Maybe we're not seeking outside consultation. And there is comfort in the discomfort for many, many people. There's comfort in, this is how it is. It may be dysfunctional, but it's how this family is. And this is what I know.
Well, it's like it's the path of least resistance, right?
Right.
Because if you choose not to do anything,
Right.
all you got to do is coast, right? You're just coasting.
Right.
And at some point, it's like either you just continue to coast off into the sunset, or you decide, you know what? No, I'm going to put the sail up right now and I'm going to go this way now.
Right.
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 You have to make that choice.
So
Interesting.
this is obviously emotion regulation is a very big topic in and of itself. And that's just one part of, when you look at emotional maturity, that's just one piece. There's lots more here. So I'm going to go on to the next steps, because maybe we should do an episode on emotion regulation and how to regulate emotions better for all of us. I mean, I think it's something we could all learn. Okay. Emotional maturity. Someone who's emotionally immature has a self-centered perspective. So they tend to prioritize their own needs, wants, desires, feelings over other people, often disregarding how their actions are affecting others. Okay. So they really have difficulty empathizing or seeing a situation from somebody else's point of view. Empathy is something that I think some people are born with it. I think also some people can learn it. And people who are emotionally mature at this point have not learned it. And they've got to learn to have empathy for others and think about it from another person's perspective. All right.
Do you think so? Somebody that's self-centered like that, like you're describing, do you think they're aware of that? Is that an active?
No, not always. I don't think they're always completely aware.
Interesting. So
Yeah,
they're not making, you're not saying they're making an active choice to be self-centered.
I think if they
necessarily.
really were questioned on it and really you could get them into a conversation where they weren't defensive and they could really look at themselves, they might be able to see it from somebody else's point of view.
Yeah.
But you'd have to get them in the right environment with defenses down, because what happens is they're going to feel some judgment. It's a delicate one, and one that I do quite a bit of work with my therapy clients on this, but it's hard to do. Yes, they can do it, but they got to be willing to do it. Usually they've got to have skin in the game. It's got to be that they're at risk of losing a relationship with somebody they're in love with or they really want to be with. This is just one part of them. And they really want to try to make changes or they don't want to get divorced and they want to keep a relationship maybe with their adult child going. And
so maybe they might be a bit desperate.
Right.
Sounds like.
Right.
Right.
I think there has some skin in the game.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Another symptom of somebody who may be emotionally immature is someone who just avoids responsibility. Okay. So they avoid, this is about the one prior about being selfish. They avoid taking accountability for their actions. Instead, they might blame other people or external circumstances, making excuses. And you all know, if you listen to the podcast, I'm all about excuses versus reasons. And most of us give excuses. Only 10% of why we don't show up and do the thing in life is because we have good reasons. This is it, like really avoiding responsibility. They struggle with following through on commitments, which leads to just unreliable or inconsistent behavior, which really affects relationships with the people around you, and it looks really selfish. They avoid taking responsibility. And if you call them out, they're like, nope.
It's not me.
I'm not owning that. I'm not going to take responsibility. I'm not
Right.
going to own that. Right.
I mean, so out in the world, we call this the Teflon syndrome. Nothing sticks to you. Like it's just no. It's there, and
they
then
have a hard shell,
and then it's not there. It's not on me. It fell off. I don't want you to talk.
Well, and I have been that way with you at times when we've gotten into some big arguments, and I've been really mad at you, and I'm just like, ugh, and I'm not willing to come to a place of resolve. I have been that way. When we first were married, you used to call me Teflon all the time. all the
Oh,
time.
that's right.
Did. What do you mean you don't you remember? Don't act like you don't remember. Okay,
I know.
You'd say, "Okay, Teflon. Okay,
I don't think
Teflon."
I did. I
Yeah.
really?
So it was an
That's
immature
so mean.
it no, it's not.
It's not?
Because it's true. I mean, there was an emotional immaturity in me. I was
Yeah.
so frustrated with you, and I just couldn't seem to make headway with trying to get you to understand where I was coming from. And then, I don't know, you would say something and I would seriously I was like Teflon. I was, I
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you and I have worked very hard on that.
No, gosh.
Very hard
We're
on
talking about like pushing
15, 20
I
years
was gonna
ago.
say we're pushing 20 years on this
But
conversation now.
but,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't do it that much anymore, but you and
No.
I have worked so darn hard on our relationship and
Yeah.
on not continuing the anger and talking through the anger and talking through what the issues are. And even if we are raising our voices and being just so at times pissed off, I hope that I'm not doing it as much. I'm showing more vulnerability.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's,
Yeah.
but I was that way. And I will, yeah, it was a piece of me that was emotionally immature.
Yeah.
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 So, I mean, I'll own that. I'll own that all day long.
Yeah.
You were hard for me. You and I are I'm an Aquarius, you're a Cancer. I mean, my friend who's all into astrology said to me when I told her she's like, "I know you're an Aquarius." I told her you were a Cancer. She goes, "Really?" She goes, "That makes for odd bedfellows." She goes,
Odd
"That's really
bedfellows.
very rare."
That's
Because
interesting.
we are wired so different.
Yeah.
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 So, okay.
Which is a challenge and it's also a blessing at the same time, right? Because
But
like
man, it has been hard
it
fighting with you.
it
You've been a big pain in my butt.
yeah, but we don't, we don't
You have been a pain in my butt.
okay.
I know I've been a pain in your butt
But
too.
I think with
I
the
know I
things
have.
that we both bring to the table that are different are good for the other person. I stress you out in a good way as you do me,
Well,
right?
not such a good way in the beginning.
I'm not
I
talking about the
mean,
beginning. I'm
it's
talking about now.
I've had to swallow my pride.
Yeah.
I've had to learn to fight with you in a way that I've never fought with anybody before. Debate, argue, one-upmanship a little bit in the very beginning. Who's right? I think we've both grown quite a bit in that arena of how
100%.
to fight well. Yeah.
Yeah.
But man, there were
100%.
some days when I was so mad at you.
I'm a good debater. What are you gonna
Not really. You shut down, you get your back up against a wall, and yeah. So you do. So I'm the more verbal person. You will do the shutdown where you will just stop talking, the silent treatment, which
say?
is
Yeah.
from back to Gottman's.
And I've worked so
Yeah.
hard on that because
You
I
have
don't
worked
like
on
the
it. Yeah.
idea of
You will stonewall me,
yeah.
which is
Yeah.
very,
Yeah.
very dysfunctional. Very dysfunctional. Yeah. We both have done these things to each other. Of course.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So another sign of a symptom of somebody who might be emotionally immature is black and white thinking, or we call it all or nothing thinking. So if you're a black and white thinker, you see situations in the extremes. It's either all good or all bad. There's no nuance. There's no gray. There's nothing in between. People with black and white thinking really struggle to navigate complexity, like I just said, or shades of gray, okay, in relationships and in decision making. So
So when I use the term, sometimes I'll say you paint with this really broad
you say that to me
brush.
all the time.
Is
You say that to me.
but that's what this is, right? Like it's not everything every time. Like when you use the words never and ever,
Never and always. Those are absolute
yeah,
statements we don't really like.
you don't like those. Yeah.
No, it goes back to the therapy world. No,
Right.
I grew up, this comes from my family of origin. I grew up, many of you may know this, in a very conservative religious home, and there were a lot of rules, and it was black and white. This is sin. That's not a sin.
Right.
It was very fire and brimstone. This is a sin, and life is black and white. I think my dad even may have I heard that said. So when I got to be thought that way in college, probably thought that way, started to change my thinking a little bit in graduate school. But it wasn't until really I was in my mid to late 20s when I actually was learning cognitive behavioral therapy, which consider this a thought distortion. I realized because I had to teach this to groups, I was doing group therapy, and I realized that's me. This is a cognitive distortion. What do you mean? This has been like how I think. This is how I run my life. It ran deep for me. And then to have me in a way get smacked in the face with the idea that my cognition was an unhelpful thought pattern threw me. We're always still growing. And this was a big one for me in my late 20s to move out of black and white thinking. So that's a sign of somebody being emotionally immature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
mean,
that's such a good example of like You grew up one way,
And so did you.
as did I,
Yeah.
right? And we didn't know differently for a long time. And then all of a sudden we were exposed to something different.
Right.
And we were like, well, hang on a second.
Right.
Let's think this through, right? Talk about it.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when I would go back home and I would see it come up, conversations maybe with my mom or my dad, I would try to push back against that system that I grew up in, right? My family system. And I would get complete pushback.
Mm,
And then it was like, yeah, not worth it. Not worth it. I'm married. I live in another city. I've got my own family. I love my parents. I accept them for who they are, for their flaws, but I do not think like this anymore. It wasn't worth it, whether it came to religion or politics, or this is just how you run your life. I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not doing that. And I think
yeah.
you've done the same thing with the black and white
Yeah.
thinking.
Those are tough. Those are tough situations and super tough conversations.
And was it an emotional immaturity on my parents' part? Maybe to a certain degree, because I think every single one of us deals with this to a certain extent.
Sure.
You know,
No,
the
100%.
difference is I don't think my mom and dad really cared to change it because they were not psychologically minded and couldn't care less about this stuff.
Well, that plus they were so far into it,
And that's that's that
right?
generation above us. I mean,
Yeah.
what are they, Gen? Well, my parents were born in the 30s. My father's been deceased now almost 5 years. My mother's 89. I mean, my mother was born in 1936. She remembers World War II. My father, I remembered it too. I mean, that's not baby boomers.
Before
That's the
that.
before that. I
Yeah.
forget what
I
that
forget that
generation
is.
is. Very different
We'll get back
philosophy.
to you on that one.
Yeah, but very different way of viewing the world and life, right?
100%.
Yeah.
It's important to me that the supplements I take are of the highest quality. And that's why for 5 years, I've been drinking AG1. Unlike many supplement brands, AG1 conducts relentless testing to set the standard for purity and potency. I know I can trust what's in every scoop of AG1 because it's tested for 950 contaminants and banned substances, while the industry standard typically only tests for 10. Taking care of my health shouldn't be complicated, and AG1 simplifies this by covering my nutritional basis and setting myself up for success in just 60 seconds. AG1's ingredients are heavily researched for efficacy and quality, and I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. So if you want to replace your multivitamin and more, start with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 plus K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first subscription at drinkag1.com/Anna. That's drinkag1.com/Anna. Check it out. You will not regret it.
The next one is the fear of vulnerability. So people who are emotionally immature, they avoid emotional depth, often deflecting serious conversations or shutting down. Like I just said, when emotions get intense, they may struggle to build meaningful, intimate connections due to discomfort with vulnerability. So I've had this conversation how many times this week alone with clients, encouraging people to have difficult conversations, my clients, and really coaching them up on this and coming back to me. And it's the holidays, so there's a lot more family holiday get-togethers. There's a lot more meals that people are sharing, and it's no mistake that it's happening here now in December. And they're coming back to me saying, I tried what you said and I tried to do that. And oh my gosh, she just made a snarky comment back to me and that shut me down. Or he just totally ignored me and he got shut down and that got me shut down. It's my clients showing vulnerability, being authentic, saying what it is they're thinking and feeling and trying to find a neutral time. I coach them up on, don't do it when you're about to sit down to dinner. Find a time when you're
Yeah.
relaxed, try to find a neutral time. Don't do it when there's alcohol involved. And they did those things and it's still for them backfire because the person they're talking to isn't having it because they're not going to make themselves vulnerable and they're defensive and their ego is very much in play here. And they're like, nope, nope, nope. Not listening to you talk to me about how you feel that I raised you or how we did talk in this family. And then my client's like, oh my gosh, it was such a big deal for them to bring it up in the first place. They're like, okay, 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 not having the conversation. Bye. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And just encouraging them to continue to have those conversations. And then there's a point where it's like, okay, we need to stop because you're talking to a wall. And so now we talk about boundaries and how to take care of oneself and self-preservation when you cannot have these difficult conversations with extended family.
Yeah.
Now, your spouse, that's a different story. That's a different conversation. But fear of vulnerability is really big for people.
Yeah.
Scary.
No, super scary.
Yeah, it is. So people who are emotionally immature, they are reactive. They're not going to be as reflective, at least in the beginning. They may react impulsively to situations without considering the long-term consequences or the feelings of other people. So that's really about like a little bit of that selfish thinking. They struggle taking the time. They have difficulty stopping to process their emotions or situation, really thoughtfully before responding. They're not responding, they're reacting. I always tell my clients, and for all of you, respond, don't react. Take an adult time out. Bite your tongue, like just don't knee jerk, like when you go to the doctor and they testing your reflexes and they put the rubber thing on your knee and your knee just shoots up, right? Don't do that in life. Get up, go to the bathroom, shut the door, leave, or just close your eyes, take a few deep breaths. Now you can say something. Now respond. When you take those deep breaths and you are mindful about it, and that's like, I can talk to you about that in another episode, that actually changes your physiology, actually changes the physiology.
Yeah.
So when you take a few deep breaths and tell yourself, respond, don't react, that'll be very different for you.
Yeah.
Then you become a little bit more reflective.
This is a tough one because it's all based around time, right? Because if you react, it's instant.
It's hard. It is hard.
And if you reflect, there's a delay.
And you and I, this whole conversation that we're having about emotional immaturity, I said this earlier. This is something I think many of us have some of these. Many of us are like, I don't do that, but I do that, I do that. We're all evolving. We're all on this journey, right? This is personal development, which if you're interested, you're listening to this podcast, you're interested. You have some interest in psychology and bettering yourself. So this is a journey. So this conversation, there's no judgment here. And don't judge yourself if you're listening to this, okay? When I say think about it where you come into all this, because I have done this and I do this. I've worked really hard on not, but I do it still. And so do you.
Absolutely. Of course.
Yeah, right?
I mean, this is personal development for life. Like, I think you need to add that little extra
For
phrase,
life,
right? Because
right.
this doesn't end in 6 weeks. This isn't like you're not signing up for a session and then it's all good and you can coast till you're 90. This goes on always.
Always.
Yeah.
Always. And it's like, the person at work who bugs the crap out of you that you just want to like, oh, I just want to say something snarky to them. Like, okay, I get it. I understand why you feel that way, but bite your tongue. Just wait a minute.
Yeah.
Because it might come back. Don't do it. Don't go there. It might come back to bite you in the ass.
It always does.
Yeah.
It always does.
Right. Okay. Next one is dependence or over-reliance. So this is, they seek validation, approval, or reassurance from others in excessive or inappropriate ways. Somebody who lots of reassurance, seeking it. Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Can I? What do you think? That's a little bit of an emotional immaturity. They may exhibit childlike dependency or expect others to meet their emotional needs without reciprocating. I don't see this as much, but you all can think in your life if you know anybody like this. So may exhibit a childlike dependency or expect others to meet their emotional needs without giving it back. So it's like a kind of like a selfishness, but they don't realize it's selfish. So this is really just dependence or over reliance. But to me, this is more about insecurity. They're just really insecure.
Yeah.
And it's an emotional immaturity. I have compassion for this one. I think that these are people who really just struggle with knowing who they are and struggle with confidence and seek reassurance from others. And I have people who come into my practice and I coach them up here on confidence. But first, we got to look at their self-esteem and their self-worth. So this to me is a little bit deeper. And I have a lot of compassion for this one.
This one's confusing to me. So this is the person that needs to be constantly built up. They rely on that
because of what they don't feel on the inside. But I have to kind of go in another direction here with a major caveat that I also see this in my therapy practice with OCD. So obsessive compulsive disorder,
Mm.
which is an Axis 1 diagnosis, falls under the umbrella of like anxiety to an extreme. I see this constant reassurance from people with OCD about like, are you sure? You sure that you put the knives and forks in the dishwasher? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are
Mm.
you sure? Somebody who has to keep checking and keep checking and keep checking, lights on, lights off, lights on, lights off. So this is something that childlike dependency, this can go a little bit deeper. So when I was doing my research and taking my notes about this topic today, this came up and I was like, I just have compassion for this. And that's why people come to me as a life coach around this, and they don't want therapy. They want coaching, but they love that I'm a therapist because I know all the mental health side. And when I see this in my coaching practice, sometimes I have to go in the direction of looking at, all right, are we looking at a diagnosis here of something different?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all
Okay.
right.
That sounds like a separate
Yeah, it could be a separate
conversation,
one.
but
Right.
just to itself,
Right.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
You could go back if you want to know more about OCD. Back in 2020, and I don't know what episode it is, I had Robin Ross on, who is a psychologist who specializes in OCD treatment, and it was a fantastic interview. That's all she does. And so that would be, you could go back and search back. I think it's go back to 20 or 21, and it's interview with Robin Ross, Ross, if you want to know more about OCD. That was a
I
really good
mean, we can
episode.
probably drop that in the show
The show
notes,
notes.
right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
just a
yeah. We'll
reference.
do that.
We'll reference
Yeah.
it.
So
Yeah.
we'll put a link to that if you want to know more about obsessive compulsive disorder. Okay. The next one is difficulty handling conflict, which really comes as no surprise. People who are emotionally immature, they just avoid or escalate conflicts instead of addressing them constructively. And we've been talking about this whole time, more specifically with family relationships. What happens is they may resort more to passive aggressiveness, the silent treatment, which you and I have talked about, or having explosive arguments rather than just open communication. So it's a big, huge fight. Silent treatment, passive aggressiveness. He's like really kind of sticking the knife in someone's back, being low key. Sure, I'll do that for you. And you have right. I have no intention of doing that for you. Sure, I make dinner every night and we all know that that's kind of what I do. But all of a sudden it's Friday night. I ain't making dinner.
Yeah.
Nope.
No
Not doing it.
chance.
Yeah, that's passive aggressive behavior or the
Yeah.
silent treatment, which is stonewalling, which is really very brutal. And I've been talking about it on social media this week. It's mean, it's cruel, it's toxic. And I recommend if you do it, try to, well, not try, stop doing it, get help if you need help with it, but don't give people the silent treatment. It's one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse of John Gottman's Secrets to How to Make a Marriage Work, and his very, very popular book that was written almost 30 years ago that we still use today. Gottman theory, which is a form of marital treatment that I'm trained in. And there's the four horsemen, one of them is stonewalling. And his studies proved that he could, by observing couples in their air quote natural habitat, I think for 2 minutes, he could predict when somebody would divorce. And he was overwhelmingly accurate. One of the four horsemen is stonewalling, which is a silent treatment that's very damaging to relationships.
Absolutely.
Not just marriages, all relationships.
Yeah.
All right.
This one is really, if you think about the range, it's huge.
Yeah.
Right? You're talking about the silent treatment all the way up to like being like this master at fighting, right? Or arguing. There's a lot there that you could
A master
do.
at fighting is you do it well. Like there is such a thing as fighting well.
But
They're
in
not
this
a master
case,
at fighting well.
they're just a master
They're a
of
master
doing
of
it,
screaming and having
Yeah.
explosive
Yeah.
blow-ups.
Yeah.
Which is terrifying for people.
Yeah.
That could be terrifying for people, and it's a form of abuse, actually.
Of
Verbal
course.
abuse.
Of course it
Verbal and
is.
emotional abuse.
Yeah.
Okay, emotionally immature people, what do you think? They tend to have more superficial relationships. And I was going to say that to you earlier. Surface level connections, they avoid emotional intimacy or depth because they don't know how to have a relationship like that. That's very difficult for them. Let's keep it surfacey. I see this all the time over the years in my practice. Somebody trying to go deeper. Somebody wants more of an emotionally intimate connection. And the person's like, yeah, no, not happening because I don't know how to do it.
Right.
Well, it's painful to watch in families.
Yeah.
And that's what I talked about earlier in this episode when you're trying to talk to a family member about a problem that you're having, or can we talk about our relationship? And they're like, nope, not doing it.
Yeah.
And they get shut down because the family system that they are used to is we don't do that here. The elephant is in the kitchen for a reason. It's staying there. We talk about surfacey stuff like what we're doing for Christmas. We don't talk about how I felt when you said that in front of everybody at that party Thanksgiving and you embarrass me. We no, 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 we don't do that. Not in this family. So let's keep it superficial.
Yeah.
And we both know we've had these conversations in our families of origin, not you and I, in our families we came from,
Totally.
and it gets shut down. Like,
Yeah.
we don't do that.
Yeah.
There's no acknowledgement. There's no owning. There's no responsibility. We don't do that in this family. So stop talking. How many times have you
Go now.
personally experienced that, Tim?
Totally.
Many times.
So I saw this, and we won't get into this too deep because we just won't. But so I saw this play out in real time at a work retreat last week where
Yeah.
we were in a situation where we were encouraging to have this deep dive conversation. And it was interesting to see some people were okay with that. And some people were terrified to the point where
They're like, I'm out.
They totally
out.
excused themselves from it. And I found myself, and we won't, like I said, we don't even get into to any of this, but like, I just thought it was interesting to watch people, how they handled it. And it was interesting to watch myself because of all the time that you and I have spent together doing all this exact stuff. And I was like asking these questions. They were questions that were like, you couldn't dance. Like you had to you had to go there.
Yeah.
And it was so helpful for some people because they were like able to like, okay, like that's tough, but like, all right, let's do this. You know what I mean? And other people were like, oh my gosh. I had a couple people come up to me after and they're like, nice job with some of those questions because we learned so much more about
each other
people today
by having more intimate conversations.
Yes.
And I will say, because you and I have talked about this before, obviously, I will say for those who didn't want to do that, they get it out because that is these are work relationships.
100%.
Yeah, they get it out. And
Yeah.
if they wanted to go to, somebody got up and it's like, it's late, I'm going to bed. They obviously did not want to have that conversation. No judgment on them. And I know that that's fine. These are work relationships. You're on a retreat. You don't have to talk about more intimate stuff. I think it could be.
It's risky.
That person may have felt it was inappropriate. And I understand that.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. I think we were all at a point of feeling
I think it's great
vulnerable.
That I think it's wonderful that you all, those who did feel vulnerable and could go there, did it all day long. I think that's wonderful. And because it's work, I think, and I know you did respect it.
Totally.
Those who didn't want to do it, that's okay too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Emotionally immature people have a sense of entitlement. You're probably not surprised to hear that. They believe that they are owed a certain treatment, privileges, or outcomes, often without effort or regard for fairness. Entitlement, we see that quite a bit, I think, in this day and age. And that can be a sign of emotional immaturity, that you're an entitled individual. Don't you see how you're behaving? Don't you see how it's affecting the people around you? Don't you have the awareness of how you're showing up and the way you're talking and acting? It's easier for people on the outside to see entitlement. You know it when you see it.
Oh, absolutely. You know it. And you wish that the other person actually did know it and was just playing.
That's
right?
That's the emotional maturity.
Like, okay, you see it too, right? But that doesn't happen.
No, they don't.
Most of the time.
And they become resentful or angry if you bring it up because they have expectations that they want you to meet. And all you're doing is bringing that up. They're just going to, no way. And they're going to not listen to you.
It just makes it worse.
Yeah, I know. So that's another symptom. The last one is just this nice segue, lack of self-awareness. They just really struggle to recognize their own emotions, motives, or their behaviors and how they impact other people. At its worst, they are unwilling or unable to reflect on how they contribute to problems in relationships or other areas of their life.
I think you could say this one might be the biggest one.
Lack of self-awareness.
Right?
Huge.
Because that touches so many things.
Like, we all have a level of a lack of self-awareness. Every single one of us.
Yeah.
You know.
But if it's bad, it's really bad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's being unwilling or unable to reflect on how they contribute to problems and relationships in their lives.
Yeah.
That's real immaturity. And I think to myself, hopefully they will something will put a fire under their butt that'll throw them into a therapist's office. Or maybe, like I said earlier, they have got some skin in the game. Maybe they're risking losing a relationship, something they really care about. Maybe they are struggling with having positive experiences at work. Maybe they continue to get fired. Something is happening in their life that is not working for them. They're losing friends or they have no friends. That usually is what brings them to a therapist's office and we start to do this work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I find this one very challenging, like in a good way, which sounds really backwards. I mean, I've had so many people over the course of years of managing people, like different personalities, different demographics, different ages, all of that.
Socioeconomic. Yeah.
And it's like you'll see people, you'll run into this type of personality often, right? That is just not, they're not really aware of what they're doing or how they're acting
showing
or
up.
how they're being
Yeah.
seen.
Mm.
And so I take it as a challenge to myself to like, those are all good, really coaching moments, right? And you're not going to like, it's not a light switch here. This is not going to change in an instant.
No.
So it's like, if we continue to offer positive coaching, then the hope is that over time, some of that starts to rub off a little bit.
I remember many, many years ago, and you were having an issue with someone who was an employee of yours who was, I don't know, they were doing something that wasn't right. And there was a lot of criticism around this person about how they were behaving or how they were acting. And you had to talk to them, and you were trying to talk to them in a kind way, a nice way, or a gentle way. This is probably more than 15 years ago. And I remember that you told me they weren't getting it. And you just flat out said to them, "You're not good at this." Yeah. I don't want to say, but
I don't remember this
I
this
remember,
moment, but
yeah, I remember you had just like, "You're not good at this."
yeah.
And then they finally got it because you had to be, and you're like such a kind, gentle person. And I think that person knew you to be that way. So when you spoke in that way to them, they took notice and they made change. And it was a big moment. It was a light bulb moment for them and they changed.
Yeah.
But you had to get to that point. Like, you're not good at this. You need to work on this.
Yeah.
You know? And I think it's just, we all have some lack of self awareness. We all struggle with this,
100%.
right?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
All of us do.
All of us.
100%.
So, I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I could go on and on about it because it's something that I think we all, I used to think I was so self-aware, and then I took a self-awareness survey and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not that self-aware. I thought I was.
Right.
It was an international one where it was looking at micro expressions of people from different cultures. And I thought I was pretty good at it, but I found that I'm not always self-aware of myself and how I show up. I try to be, but you just don't know in different cultures with different people. You just don't know.
Right.
Okay. So let's end now. And we will do a part 2 because we're going to talk about how you deal with people who are emotionally immature in your life. How do you deal with them? All right. So that's part 2. So please don't forget to subscribe, rate with 5 stars, review the podcast, makes all the difference in the world. And thank you for listening. And mad love to all of you. Okay. Until next time, we're going to do a part 2. So stay tuned.